realized that Juliet was not the type to be fooled by appearances, and she would not throw herself at him without clothes. That was why he'd chosen her to be his maid, but still, he didn't understand what Juliet meant by not being the least bit interested in him. His imagination began to picture that it was because he didn't have any charm in him. All of a sudden, he threw his legs up on the seat next to Juliet, explaining that his legs were numb from sitting so long, and since Jeff wasn't here to give him a massage, it was his fault that Jeff wasn't here. Juliet was shocked at such insolence. After all, he could have just asked for her to give him a massage, but he started acting like a mean uncle at the store. But of course, she couldn't refuse her master's request, so she started giving him a massage that was more like pinching, and of course the prince didn't like it. So he started to pick on her, and Juliet kept correcting her mistakes more and more. Killian had long ago noticed that his maid's demeanor lacked even a shred of respect for her master, and she didn't care at all about his appearance, or the fact that he was from the imperial family. Some would say it's a negative trait, but it will be just right for the prince, and clearly much better than those who have gone before. And while they were driving, he closed his eyes. So Juliet stopped the massage, thinking he was asleep, but he made her keep doing it anyway, because he wasn't really asleep. At night, they arrived at an inn where they decided to spend the night, and Killian also told his butler Albert to stop the Count of Baden from entering the territory at least this time, or he would be ready to retire. It seems that this was not something the butler could do at all, because the Count could be understood. After all, he can't help but come and greet a member of the imperial family. But actually, that wasn't the only problem, because this Count was trying to slip the prince's elder daughter, who was already married, and his younger daughter, who was still a very young child. So it couldn't be called a greeting, and he certainly didn't want to see him again. Then Killian wanted to know what happened to Jeff, and as it turned out, because of the severe burn on his chin and neck, he would temporarily be unable to work. So Albert was going to work in his place, but the prince said he already had a maid, so Albert didn't need to do it. And Juliet was shocked, because it was definitely not her job. And Albert was surprised too, for he knew that the prince never liked to be touched by another maid. And now he had even asked for a bath to be prepared so that she could help him wash. She decided to find out if they were really talking about her. And as it turned out, it was true. And now she had to go and make a bath for the prince. The only upside to all this was that she would be paid more money. She is resigned to her task, after all. She has seen the prince's naked body many times before. So there is nothing to be embarrassed about, and she can just help him wash. She, as Prince Bertino's maid, must work like a true professional in her job. Photo us sprinkled water, a large amount of body wash. Well, even that didn't help her. For as it turned out, it simply dissolved, giving no soapy lather that could cover the Duke's body. And that was a huge disadvantage. When Killian went into the tub to see why Juliet was taking so long to prepare the water, he was surprised to see such a pungent odor. And the only thing Juliet could say was that the bath powder had slipped out of her hands and fallen into the water. So she suggested that the prince just wash his hands and feet, and tomorrow they would wash completely. That itself seemed like the perfect plan, but the prince said to take the tub outside so he wouldn't smell that awful odor. After this, Juliet went to the knight and told him to take the bathtub out into the drawing room. And of course he was not happy about such an order, but he complied with it. And then the prince got into that tub, for the odor was no longer so strong in the living room, and Juliet had to wash it after all. But he didn't understand why she was taking it so seriously, and so she had to take a rag and help him wash himself. She rubbed everything so thoroughly that it even looked like the prince's body was like some kind of dishcloth. She did it all with her eyes closed. It was embarrassing for the children to watch, and she didn't even notice if the water dripped on her or not. Then Killian remembered that Albert had told him that of course Juliet was attentive and responsible, but when she didn't want to do something, it was immediately obvious. And it was kind of funny to watch her expression. She was not at all like the other maids, and that was what made her interesting to the prince. Suddenly he heard a scream, which made him very surprised, and at first he didn't realize what had happened. From Juliet immediately started apologizing for the fact that her hand had accidentally touched something it shouldn't have touched. That's why she was so scared, and definitely didn't want to continue. The prince said she was just making funny noises, and really she should wash everything in there too. And if he had to wait for her to make up her mind, He would have to lie in that bathroom until morning. And then Juliet wasn't just confused. She was in complete shock that she froze in place, trying to comprehend what he had just said to her. She clearly didn't want to wash his peppers. The prince realized this, and told her to give him the rag back, and she could go and take care of dinner, and he could handle the washing himself. And after that, Juliet was very happy, and began to thank him. And then she quickly ran away. Ilian, had he known in advance that she would be so excited, would have held her back a little longer, but still, she was already gone. After a while, Albert came in. He looked very excited, for the Count had told him to tell him that he would not move until he had greeted the prince. Killian had already finished his water and was dressed in clean clothes. He told Albert to send the Count away, because he would start talking about his daughters again. But Albert couldn't do that, for he had already tried. But the Count was still stubborn, and wouldn't go away. And since Albert was just a butler, he couldn't prevent the aristocrat's reckless behavior, especially since they had a long journey tomorrow. At that moment, Juliet quietly said that the best defense is offense, and then everyone's attention was on her. So she explained that if you always sit on defense, it will eventually be destroyed. Therefore, what the Count is so stubbornly trying to achieve means that he won't give up until he gets his way. So before the prince's defenses are shattered, we need to make sure it doesn't come to that. Albert wanted to rebuke Juliet for being so disrespectful to the prince in her words, but Killian himself interrupted him and said that actually Juliet had said a good point. So he told Albert to go out and say that the prince had fallen asleep early from fatigue. If the earl still tries to enter the room, he should be taken away, accused of disobeying the prince's order. After that, Albert obeyed and went to tell the Count. The prince turned to Juliet with a wry smile. He seemed to be up to something, which made the girl a little uneasy. Then he said he wanted to sleep together. He said it. He meant in the same room. So Juliet slept on the floor and he on the soft bed. But still she thought that was not the way to do it. So she said the prince should ask for the best guards standing outside. But the prince said that there was no need for that, and that whatever happened, his trusty maid would try with her whole body to cover him and save him. Then he said she had better take off her glasses, for they might break in her sleep. The most trustworthy maid he talked about was Juliet, so she couldn't help but worry. Then she decided to take his advice and take off her glasses after all, even though she was worried that he would recognize her from the day they had first met in the theater. But still, it had been months since that day, so she hoped he wouldn't remember her. After all, it would be problematic if he realized she was the one who had poured the wine on him that time. With her glasses on, she went further to bed, but still she was very uncomfortable because of the iron corset she wore. She was certainly not happy that she had to endure such suffering because of the prince. She was also still unable to lie down comfortably, and the prince couldn't sleep because of it. He told her not to fidget down there, for she must sleep, or perhaps she expected something else from the night. When Juliet tried to pretend to be asleep, making strange noises that made the prince decide to keep Juliet as his maid after all, and tell Albert that he no longer needed to find another servant. After all, where would he be able to find such a funny and hateful servant girl? One of the Count's daughters had come to his room after all. It was clear from the sounds outside the door, so the prince tried to wake Juliet, but she had just fallen asleep and was in a deep sleep, so she couldn't wake up at the mere act of addressing her. And I think she had a dream where she wanted to shave so she could put on the wig more easily. Then the prince didn't understand what she was talking about at all, and she didn't understand what she could be dreaming about, that she didn't even respond to his response when he called out to her. And at that moment, the door did open. Then a girl came in and climbed right on top of the prince in his bed to seduce him. But this only made the prince even angrier, and he was also surprised at such insolence. He threw the girl to the floor, causing her to scream very loudly. Juliet woke up after all. She couldn't understand what was going on, so she had to turn on the light. At first she thought he wanted to sleep with some girl right when his maid was sleeping, but he said he didn't. When she turned on the light, she walked over to the girl who was lying on the floor and tried to bring her to her senses. She seemed unconscious or asleep, but either way, pity had to get her out of the room. She tried to wake up that girl. She could feel the evil stare behind her. The prince was like a time bomb that was about to explode if that girl wasn't taken out of the room. Then Juliet told the girl to wake up quickly, for if she did not wake up,